All right. So we're going to go ahead and kick off the very first and the inaugural Transformation Tuesday. My name is Jeremy Knudsen. I work closely with state, local, higher education, and healthcare here for Servicenow, covering what is known as the IT transformation practice. That is all things that are asset management, operations management, and business management. So project and portfolio, asset, operations, cloud-based operations. And one of the things that we have been really listening to our customers about quite recently is putting together niche pockets of webinars, so to say Q&A sessions, collaborative sessions. And so starting Transformation Tuesday will be something that we'll be doing probably the first Tuesday of every month. And in each one of these sessions, we're going to have special guest speakers coming in. We are going to be focusing on some of the key things that we see as recurring themes inside of the industry and the customers we're working with, and also a really good avenue for organizations to bring like-minded thoughts, stories together as well, and proceed forth with looking at new ways to digitally transform. So that's really the whole purpose of today's call. I'm joined here by my two colleagues, Mike Gallagher and as well Daryl Feilbach. So Daryl, do you want to go ahead, since you'll be presenting some this afternoon as well, just to say a quick hello and introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Jeremy. My name is Daryl Feilbach. I am a solutions consultant with ServiceNow. I focus on the IT asset management part of the house, and I will be doing pretty much all of the presentation and talking today, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Daryl. Hey, Mike, how about you?
Hi, this is Mike Gallagher. I'm the IT operations management advisory solution architect. So I work very closely with Jeremy, and I'm really all about understanding the operational practices and how the ServiceNow IT operations management solutions can help transform your current operations practices and really kind of move forward and continue to scale up from a maturity standpoint. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today. I'll be here just to listen in and help out if needed. So feel free to chime in if you have questions.
Oh, thank you, Mike. And we also have another guest on the line, and we'll have him answer questions as well. But we're joined by the full IT transformation team here, and this is going to be a recurring theme. We look forward to seeing you again on the next Transformation Tuesday, but we'll go ahead and kick this one off. So a couple of things as a housekeeping items. I will figure out, I guess, how to unmute if you'd like to come off and have a dialogue with us verbally. We are more than welcome and open to that. But there's also down below inside of your menu bar on the Zoom webinar meeting, you'll see a Q&A, but you'll also see a chat window. If you choose in the chat window, there's a to area. It'll say to panelists or panelist and attendees. Highly encourage this to be a collaborative session. Add questions, thoughts, scenarios, or even if you're working on something right now that we're touching on, please highlight that. This is really your time today. And in this webinar format, again, we want to make it as collaborative, and even if it's typing or texting, as much as possible. I'll go ahead and get kicked off here really quick. And so some of the key things that we're really keen to focusing on Transformation Tuesday today is reducing hardware and software and cloud costs. So a lot of those themes, and obviously, it's probably not foreign to others that digital transformation is occurring right now at a forced and a rapid pace. Now, digital transformation to me is a lot of, are we moving to the cloud? Are we leveraging machine-based learning? I mean, you could probably mix anything into the bucket of digital transformation that you could read or glean off of LinkedIn today. And it can occur across industry. It can occur across vertical. And one of the key things that I'm seeing really as a parent theme across what transformation truly is being more efficient, leveraging the solutions that maybe you have today that can workflow and automate to create better efficiencies based on really what the outcomes, the organizational outcomes are. Now, in the theme of today, reducing software and hardware costs become really, really prevalent in what was happening yesterday and versus today. In a yesterday sense is, well, we all know that a pandemic occurred as an example, and it's pretty easy to pick on that at the current moment because during the pandemic, we had folks that were working remotely from home. Now, Costs are going to increase. Yes, there are budgets and funds and stimulus packages that come out, but then those also have to be tracked from a business management perspective to understand where they've been allocated. So yesterday was a conglomeration of things that are still coming into the organization, and then also duplicating hardware that is being deployed out to the field, duplicating software licenses, also to respond quickly to the current occurrence of forced transformation. How do we actually do those things better? So today is scaling the organization based on some of these practices for which we've all kind of learned. I think in this whole world of digital transformation, or transformation, how you want to characterize it, everyone has learned to adapt well. As humans, we adapt well. And now our organizations are going to be looking at how they scale the organization itself with the same amount of budgets that have been going on from time to time, but then also how do we look at moving forward with potentially isolating and identifying some of those low-hanging fruit areas to reduce some of the, so to say, the pain, I guess, that could come down the road of not having a full end-to-end visibility across workflow that has occurred across the course of the year. These are very common themes that Mike, Daryl, Steve Norton, myself, the organization here at ServiceNow has seen, and we're always striving to help our customers achieve that. Now, it's not that you're alone. It's not that we kind of just take all of this even from our customer statements, but if we look at the overall view that Gartner, as an industry metric and standard, has across the full spectrum, $184 billion of software is going to be wasted by the end of 2021. So if we look at how Gartner has allocated 2021 software spending, we can see that $492 billion is what the spending is. $148 billion is that there's 30% of that is either unused, out of compliance, some of those areas that we'll discuss. But then there's also this advent of the software as a service, the cloud-based spend, the largest publishers that are out there. Use cases are starting to rise up more and more and more so. It could be envelope consumption on DocuSign. It could be Box. It could be how collaboration of multiple Zoom webinar-based collaboration tools were at the forefront to simply solve for problems that the organization was having. Excuse me. So having the visibility into what those aspects look like is where we're trying to align some of that transformation expectation of reducing and shifting funds. It's not always I need to save the money or reclaim that money. It is often, can we reshift and refocus the areas of effort so that they're better used, better allocated, and we have better visibility end to end. Now, those are sometimes the soft and the hard equations of a cost analysis and a value practice put into one ecosystem. But however, we also look at a couple of other tangible areas that we can help with, and that's compliance risk, compliance audits. And audits are a when and not an if. Now, it really depends on the size and scale of the organization, but oftentimes what you'll find is that the chance of having 1, 2, and maybe even 3 audits annually is as high as 68 to 70%. So let's put this into context. If you have visibility and you understand the license compliance, your exposure, and you know that come towards the end of the year, yes, there are those larger organizations, those larger publishers that you have been consuming something from. They will come and ask for that to be right-sized. Being prepared for audits isn't necessarily having to just write the $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 check to be in compliance. It's the time and effort that it takes to be audit ready. It's the time and effort that takes to be in a position where you're defensible. You have the visibility. You can actually be in a better negotiation perspective if that is a case that you're looking to do. But there's also the advent of the time and labor. The time and labor that occurs to prepare an audit is often the largest cost outside of just writing that single check alone to remain in compliance. The operational efficiency starts to rear its head there. Again, feel free to use the chat here. I'm going to pause for a moment. And if this is something that is near and dear to everyone's heart, I know Daryl will be walking through some of the ways to license position here in just a moment, but these are common themes and areas that we often see. Mike, Daryl, any questions or any thoughts or anything to add on this before I proceed on?
No, I think we're going to go through some of these points in more detail in just a few minutes.
Yeah, perfect.
I think the key point to sum up here is that this is not a unique situation, right? Every organization out there is dealing with this on some level, and there's a lot of shared learnings going on right now. So I think we're in a good place to start thinking about driving this forward because there's a lot of people learning this all at once.
Yeah, exactly right. It's exactly right. And I think everybody is kind of going through that learning transformation kind of status quo, so to say, while tracking assets in separate systems. It prohibits the process that lets workflow at the automation piece. So, Daryl, yourself and I know Mike, you and I had seen this across the board. And just because we could do everything, we always say doesn't necessarily mean we should. But the key lowest hanging fruit is those manual processes. We talked about the silo teams that could be in procurement, could be in the asset, could be multiple user interfaces, multiple ways to access that data. And it's not saying that those processes are necessarily broken. They are not necessarily automated because they have brittle integrations. Integrations are also really, really critical to a common platform that allow, when those integrations come in, are they certified? Are you actually maintaining more technical debt to keep those integrations up to date that were homegrown or home built or not off the shelf? Constantly updating a CMDB, actually understanding what is an asset. When should an asset be in the CMDB? Mike, entrez-vous you, right? What is the statement you make about how you determine what a CI is versus an asset?
So basically, a CI is something that provides value to the organization, and an asset is something that has an intrinsic value. So if the world goes bad tomorrow, right, you can sell an asset on the black market. A CI, you can't generally.
Right. But you want to understand what that CI is. You want to understand the asset and the correlation between the two because they serve a business purpose. They serve an organizational purpose to achieve an outcome, to supply a service, to supply something that is a catalog-based item. All of those orchestration, those components are mixed together. That's hardware and software mixed together, often managed separately today. So what we're discussing here is that breaking down some of those silos and looking at those integrations and then trying to face, it doesn't have to mean all of these challenges all at once, is operations, hardware, the servicing, that IT service, the vendor management, the relationship of the contracts, the cost line items, the bidirectional integration between a general ledger and the assets and the inventory and procurement. Analytics, knowing where spend is going and predicting spend as to where it could be so that budgets are better aligned so that your financials, IT and even non-IT, are better aligned for the organization. And so a lot of the struggle with that manual piece is that those tools are disconnected, and you're often organizations are filling the gaps by the manual processes or email or Excel. So the plan, build, deliver, run, operate, your ITIL framework standards are still to get by, again, manual processes. So being able to workflow a lot of these action items that you'll see Daryl walking through here soon are helping to drive transformation. Back to the core Transformation Tuesday is, how do you drive transformation? Well, Mike, here, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you one more time. Automate yourselves. This is Mike's favorite statement. Automate yourselves out of the work you do not like doing. Mike, finish the sentence.
So that we can provide greater value back to the organization.
Exactly. So those all have an inherent cost and risk to them. So inaccurate inventories, where is it in the inventory? Is it sitting in the right location? Is it actually now end of life? What software was sitting on that? Can that also be reclaimed so that we can support compliance? You start to stitch together how actually trusting and leveraging those workflows allow technology asset management to be as crucial as it is to the services that the organization supplies to its end user, to its customer, both internal or external. So the things we're going to walk through here today are going to be pretty critical around, hey, I want to request something. Mike, I need a new laptop. Great. Mike goes through procurement or the service catalog. That's automated. It's fulfilled. That laptop is deployed to me. That laptop is now a monitored item so that it is being serviced if needed, patches, updates, any new software that needs to be procured. And then when I'm done with that laptop, that needs to be retired. All of that orchestrated really on side of the ServiceNow platform, but also through the workflow that provides the full lifecycle visibility of that as such, is really the kind of the key piece that we're going to be walking through today. So again, we've mentioned a number of times, we see this often over and over and over again. And so being able to, for the theme of the Transformation Tuesday today, look at reducing cost and mitigating risk, that's 5 million saved. And this isn't even our own numbers. I'll back up for a moment. Gartner estimates that it just in any software asset management, just software asset management program that is launched within the first year, 30% savings for the annual cost of that software that we have over the course of the first year. Now, couple that with the hardware side. So if you look at the size of the IT budget as an example, we'll just talk about IT in this construct, and just software asset management alone, 100 million, do the math. You can start to look at just some of that reclamation that can occur. And that's before it starts to even get into mitigating the unknown risks that are tied and orchestrated across the platform, the compliance, the additional soft and hard costs that are over here on the left side of reducing, just having visibility. The right side starts to bring into the equation what you're able to mitigate against. So reducing those costs and being able to shift those funds to other more critical areas is often intrinsic value for every organization that we've seen. So we focus keenly on outcomes. And as you have those, as we're going to dive right in here, I know Daryl may have a few things to mention in a moment, but if you have questions or thoughts or feedback for us here on other things you'd like to see as we go forth, please feel free to do so. But with that, I am going to get ready to hand right on over here to you, Daryl, if you don't mind.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Let me share my screen here. Okay, great. Thanks, Jeremy. So, as we talk about, asset management in general, we generally break those down into different categories. We're going to start with software. And the blur between the software, their cloud spend, your hardware is a gray line, right? A lot of overlap. But there are areas where there are some distinct differences, right? Managing a physical asset versus managing a license on the asset. They go hand in hand, but there are some things to separate out. So we'll kind of talk about them individually. The challenges of SAM. Well, due to widespread distribution, there's unclear responsibilities. There's questionable ownership, right? Organizations tend to manage their IT assets more as a reaction to an event, right? So this causes some challenges. Wasted spend. This might mean paying for software or subscriptions no longer in use. It might, Jeremy talked about some of this, paying for more licenses or subscription seats that aren't necessary. Then there's risk. Admins deploying software without understanding the license rules, deploying virtual machines in containers without understanding the license rules for those. And then, of course, the inefficient use of those resources, right? Making your staff do work that's unnecessary. So a lot of challenges, outcomes that we want to see when we're running a proper SAM program, right? Savings, obviously, and you can look at these, and compliance, right? These are the areas that really, these are kind of the two pillars of a SAM foundation is cost savings and compliance, right? So we're going to go through some of this a little more detail that Jeremy talked about, a life cycle of an asset from the software side, and we'll talk about it from the hardware side. So our goal is to, in the way we run our SAM program, is to allow our customers to operationalize, all that rich software that's installed on the devices that you have, and gather that together, and be able to, use that to make decisions dynamically. So if you start at the top in the middle, where it says request, this would be self-service software catalog, right? Your employees are purchasing and choosing what they want, right? You as a administrator, you'd be able to publish a software model for the software that they're choosing and allow customers to request that, and then dynamically allocate it to that particular user, right? Next would be the purchasing of the software. And you can kind of follow the life cycle around and see all the areas that are touched during the life of buying, deploying, servicing, and retiring a piece of software, right? So throughout this process, we can proactively surface software costs within IT change, perhaps, and we can get into that later as well. But we want to talk about the value of doing this on a platform that allows you to see cost implications as it pertains to a change, perhaps. So this is kind of how SAM works from our point of view. Essentially, what we're doing is we're comparing entitlement records, which is the right to install new software, right, with the actual discovery information. So whether that's using ServiceNow Discover or you're importing from something like SECM, what we want to do is compare these types of records to each other, right? This is called reconciliation, of course, and this gives you a compliance position. Another part of this is normalization. So normalization, this is really the key to having a clean and proper data to report on. So no matter what your SAM program looks like, you need to make sure you're starting with clean data, right? So we're taking that raw discovery data, which is the publisher, the product, the version, and we're normalizing it up to a common software model name. So it makes it much easier to reconcile with a common name that's been normalized. Otherwise, you're trying to track down several names and minor versions of every product you own, and they change all the time, and it's virtually impossible to do that in an enterprise environment. So we're going to normalize the data. We're going to reconcile it to compare them. And that's going to give us a compliance position. Are we overspending? Are we underspending? Where do we stand from a compliance position? Now, because we're on a platform and we're a workflow-centered platform, we're going to allow you to take action, right? So that's the point here, is to be able to action this data that we've then reconciled and normalized. What we're doing is looking for non-compliance, and we're trying to have cost containment. As I said, those are the two primary tenets of SAM. Maybe you call it optimization, but this is really important, perhaps the most important thing, right? Jeremy talked about being audited, and this is a real risk, right, of these, of being out of compliance. So this is something that we would like to contain. So let's dive a little deeper into some of this, how this works. So normalization. So ServiceNow sees this by flattening or standardizing your raw data to resemble a similar structure, right? So data quality is foundation. And on the left, you're kind of looking at, this is what's discovered, right? MSFT Corporation, Project Pro, a long, complicated version that's discovered. So what we want to do is throw that through our content library, add some lifecycle information to it, and normalize that out for customer view, right? Which would then give us the the values on the right. It's just Microsoft Project 2016, and then I can see the additional information, right? So this is what normalized data looks like. Let's talk about how we do that. So we provide a content service team, and this content services team, their job is to create rules for normalization, and they curate this data, and the data comes from several places. We're proactive in going out and finding this data, and we also take it from customer instances, which when there is a not found or a not matched piece of software or a piece of hardware, for that matter, since we'll be talking about hardware, to your data, right? So we'll then create rules around that and then push them back out. So this is kind of what this process looks like. So we take any unrecognized procurement, discovery, lifecycle data from your instances that we didn't recognize out of the box with our existing rules. And then our research team creates rules, they validate them, and then those are then shared out to the customer instances, right? And this is an ongoing process that you're continually in this loop, as you'll always be adding new data, and we'll always be adding to our content library. A benefit of this process is being able to get data early, and this really works well when you have early adopters like we do with of new technology, because then you're getting the latest data from our content library. Another thing that we've done that we've found has been really helpful is to give publisher information to our customers. We have found that about 80% of software spend comes down to these core main publishers, the ones you can see down here on the bottom left, from Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, and the big players. When you have such a large percentage of your software spend on these publishers, we found that the best thing to do is to start with getting a handle on that, right? Now, obviously, we want to cover everything in your environment, but this is going to be the best way to get quick time to value, start saving immediately, and let's get a handle on these. So to that end, what we've done is we've created something called publisher packs. And so these are basically the rules, licensing metrics, and things that we've built right out of the box, right? So and dashboards that allow you to go in and look at these. And so we'll take a look at these and show you what they look like and why there's so much value in these. So as I said, though, the goal is to get you 100% of your software spend covered. And so the other thing to do is with that remaining 20% is using what we call the common metrics tool. And so with common metrics, that allows you to create your own metrics models, apply them to other software vendors in your environment, and you'll be able to have a compliance position for those as well. And then sometimes it's really complicated, and we have something called custom metrics using script logic, which tracks custom items, but this is pretty rare. So another thing that we'll do is import your general ledger information, and we'll take a look at financials. And what this allows us to do is find overlapping software. So we look for potential redundancies from a functionality perspective in your environment. So we want to be able to say, hey, are we spending time on managing multiple publishers for the same piece of software? And are we spending, money on in multiple categories where we could just really be using our buying power by buying, large quantities of maybe 1 or 2 vendors instead of 10, right? This drives down costs and the need to manage multiple vendors. The other thing is you might have unvetted software, which is something to consider from a security standpoint, right? Maybe there are people that are using some freeware application that you were unaware of that hasn't been, vetted or approved. And then the other thing is finding shadow IT spend, right? With spend detection, what this allows you to do, as I said, is ingest the general ledger information. And we use, machine learning technology that will aggregate and then visualize software transactions within your environment. And what we'll do is take a look at maybe cost centers, what are they spending? And look for rogue spend as an example, right? That might be something that you were unaware of, that this cost center is purchasing something. So we want to bring all that together and give you really, clear visibility into those things. So we'll talk a little bit about SaaS before we transition into the hardware stuff. Some of the SAM challenges. SAM provides, cost-saving opportunities and proactive compliance, just the same as any other software SAM program might. And you might think that's, since it's a subscription, you can't be out of compliance. So what's to worry? And that can be true, but the vendor isn't going to let you know that you're underutilizing the application, which would mean licensed users are not using the software, right? So there can be a challenge in managing the SaaS from this standpoint. So what we do is we pull in user subscription from your cloud-based or SaaS-based application, things that you can see on the screen, things like DocuSign, Dropbox, Office 365, which I don't think is listed. The idea is to see where you stand from a user subscription perspective. But in addition to that, we want to look at meaningful activity. And the reason we do that is that we want to be fully optimized with your software. We want to know if you have users that are not using an application and you're paying for a subscription on that, right? If so, then those will be reclamation candidates, and we can pull those back and reallocate those licenses to other users or systems and save a lot on software spend. So with that, what we'll do is we'll talk about hardware, and then after we'll jump into the actual UI itself and go through kind of a demo of the things that we've been talking about. Now, hardware is a little different from a methodology standpoint, right? When we talk about managing hardware, now you're managing a physical asset that you have to touch, that can break, that you have to move from one location to another physically instead of just digitally, right? So according to the Gartner, ITAM is really 80% process and 20% technology, right? The best technology in the world will fail without a good process, right? So IT asset management from a hardware standpoint, it's a business issue disguised as an IT problem. This is the way we see that. The other thing is when you talk about IT asset management, there's a lot of overlap, and Jeremy talked about a little bit of this in the beginning. There's a lot of overlap in the other areas that you might be involved in, or your colleagues might be involved in, right? Service management, financial management, even operations management. And these 3 circles could probably have 12 circles around them, and they would all be overlapping. And so it's important to understand this principle as you talk about the process and policies you build around your HAM program. So the last point before we dig into the life cycle of HAM is it doesn't end. There's no finish line in building these. You'll have ongoing processes. So let's be aware of that as we talk about the life cycle of the physical asset, right? So this starts just like anything else. Perhaps there's a request, whether it's a request for help or a request for a physical asset. We need to have processes and workflows behind this that we can follow and use as a guide through this program. So when we think about a request, right, are we providing a front-end user for a front-end UI for the user to request an asset, right? Are we referencing a back-end catalog that maybe has predefined choices for the user to choose whether it's I need help or or a new asset from a physical standpoint? And perhaps we're providing it on a mobile application as well, and we'll talk about that as we go through. Sourcing requests, right? You need to be able to purchase these, receive these physical assets across multiple locations. This needs to be done with a simplified process that's consistent. And how we can do that is by building workflows that are consistent and are going to be the same throughout the entire process. So I mentioned mobile previously, and we have actually what we call the Servicenow Agent App, and this allows you to do several things throughout the entire life cycle that I've highlighted here. So, receiving hardware assets with a mobile barcode scanning feature. There's receive assets from POs, scan multiple assets in a single batch. Doing stockroom inventory audits. Disposing of your assets with scanning barcodes, and these are all things that can be done with the mobile agent app, really increasing productivity. So something I encourage everyone to look into. The next piece here is optimizing inventory, right? You want to improve your asset utilization and service delivery times. We'll take a look at a dashboard that's going to give you a lot of the information on things that pertain to service delivery. Next is deploying hardware, right? It's much easier to deploy hardware with normalization, as we talked about, which, providing normalization for hardware that's been providing service for hardware that's been normalized really can help increase times of service as well. So that's a really important step. The other thing that you'll probably find yourself doing is audits, as we talked about, but ad hoc audits, right? What's in our stockroom? What's in this office location? Right. So monitoring those physical assets is a really important part of this process. The same as servicing these assets, right? If you have a broken laptop, and we'll actually go through kind of one of these, workflows of, hey, I broke an asset. What do I do now? And we'll talk about best practices. Allowing customers to open a ticket right on their phone and say, hey, I've got an issue, I need service. And then the last piece here is the retirement of a device. We've found that organizational businesses' goals are built on the business and technical services they provide to their customers. So the performance of those services is critical, right? So by knowing what hardware assets support a service or an organization can dramatically reduce downtime. We want to be able to look at life cycle dates and know this is going end of life. It's going to affect this service or this server or this area of the business. And then really the last piece here is being able to change these workflows to customize them as you see fit for your business. So what we'll do is provide these out of the box workflows for all of your ham environment. But what if I need to make a change, right? How is that? So what we're going to do is provide, no code or low code workflows that can be changed and edited as needed. So I'll show you a little bit of that too. The last thing before we jump into the demo here is really think about, your policies and your processes, and how you have this program built out, right? And the slide here is we're not going to go through, yes or no, have you done that, obviously, but something for you to think about from a process standpoint. When it comes to the hardware, do we have a policy in place? Is it documented, right? When we're doing audits, are we tracking these? Is there a documented policy, right? Is there a procedure for this? So that's what I wanted to show from a setup standpoint, if you will. So what we'll do is we'll take a couple minutes here and go through the.
Hey Daryl.
Really Jeremy.
Just a quick moment. Thanks for chiming in here in the chat. Some really good questions have come in, and again, that is what this is for. So if there's something you folks would like to see as we've gone through this or highlight, please do so. One question, Daryl, that came in, and it's a great one, which is, should I deploy or should I look at doing hardware asset management practice first over software asset, or software first and hardware asset? And the way I answer the question oftentimes, and Daryl would like your thoughts and feedback, is it kind of is dependent upon where the largest value will be for the organization to begin with, and oftentimes that's definitely an implementation and kind of a consulting engagement. But you'll want to look at the processes, as Daryl was just showing on that last slide, where you have some of the lowest hanging fruit to mature some of those processes. They do tie together. So the key theme there is that hardware and software asset management, while they may look like they're two completely separate animals, and in some regards they could be, but they're all under an asset management principle. So where you're looking to streamline those efficiencies is where I typically see organizations starting their journey on that. Daryl, anything to add to that piece?
Yeah, I think the answer is it does depend. They're different in far as deployment goes, right? Software is probably more complicated from a standpoint that license management can be very complicated, right? But they're also going to be how quick can you get value out of it. So you really need to look at where am I struggling the most before that question is answered. If you have no way of deploying hardware and moving hardware, and you find yourself literally, writing things down on a spreadsheet, you might want to look at hardware, right? If you find yourself, we have no idea how many licenses are deployed and we are buying the same piece of software over and over again, then that's probably a good place to start as well.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl.
Sure.
Appreciate the question too there.
So let's jump in. Hopefully you can still see my screen. We're looking at, let me jump back to this one. I've got a couple things open. So what we're going to do is go through the user interface here, and this is going to give us some best practices and some things that if you're already running an ITAM program, hopefully you'll learn a few tricks of things that you should be doing, and if you're not, then this is things that you could be doing, hopefully this will give you a better idea of how we see the asset management program going. So we're going to look at some dashboards and some workflows in both software and hardware world. So the first thing we're looking at here is the software publisher analytics dashboard. And you can see it's got different publisher packs, as I talked about earlier, here across the top. This is designed to give you a snapshot of what's going on in the environment specific to that publisher. And then the graphs are showing just some top installed products, how many of those products. It's an at-a-glance type of report. So in the top left-hand corner here, you can see that I've got some products out of compliance. Of course, that's based on the latest reconciliation, right? Again, that's done by comparing the number of entitlements you have versus the number of software installations you have. And that calculation gives you this compliance position. So we're showing I've got 15 products out of compliance. So we'll come right back to that. True up costs, the next one on the top there, if Microsoft did an audit today, this is the amount of money that it's going to cost me to right size my contract based on these licensing scenarios, right? We won't go through all of them, but I like to highlight this one here. Actual savings year to date. This is going to let me know if I'm making progress with my SAM program. Right? This report gives me the ability to look at how much money have I saved by reclaiming underutilized software and then reallocating it to other people versus just purchasing more software. All right, so let's talk about products out of compliance. So we'll dig into this. So this is something everyone should be looking at regardless of how you're looking at it. This is a major cost savings effort. This is what we call the license workbench. So we'll drill into this a bit and find some areas where we can find cost savings. So if we come into project here, I can see, I have different, this might be small here, but if that says compliant, that one says not compliant. So we'll come into the non-compliant version of Microsoft Project 2016 Professional Windows, right? So you can see how many rights I have. I own 100 rights and how many rights I've consumed. I've consumed 135. Obviously, there's a variance. That's a problem. So if I were to right size this contract, my true up cost would be $41,000. Well, that's a lot of money. I need to fix that. I don't want to pay $41,000 plus all of the fees and penalties for being out of compliance. So let's remediate this. So we're going to give you some remediation options. So when I come into the remediation options, one of the things I can do is I can go just purchase more, right? I can spend that $41,000, buy 35 more licenses, and be compliant. Again, that's going to be an expensive fix, but we have the workflow built in to take you down that path. But what about people that are not utilizing that software as much as they should be? We call those removal candidates or reclamation candidates, right? So if I come to this tab here, removal candidates, I can see I've got 29 potential candidates for underutilizing the software that they have. I could reclaim this and then give those licenses out to those 29 of those to the 35, and now I'm only left with a variance of 6, right? And if we come and start looking at the reasons for these, it's going to say, the justification, low usage. And you'll see if I come in, it starts to kick off another workflow that's going to take me down the path of reclaiming this license. Now I can just click reclaim and the whole thing is done. But I can also have a workflow that says, let's send the user an email and give them a chance to tell me if they're using it or not. And they'll have a yes or no in the email. You're still using this or not? And that'll, kick off the process for reclaiming that license. So I'll quickly tangent before I come back to this and talk about reclamation and how that works. So what you should be doing is building reclamation rules. Right. So these are some of the reclamation rules I've built, and you can build new ones, and they're simple. So we'll jump into one of these here. So this is just a random one for Adobe Illustrator. So I've built this.
Daryl, sorry for pausing really quick. Is there a slight chance you can zoom in just a bit so we can see the text a little bit better? I'm sorry, bud.
Is that better?
Yeah, that should be just a little better. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it,
Daryl. Thanks, Jeremy. So this is the reclamation rule for Adobe Illustrator, and it's based on, you can see here, usage metering data, right? So in the last month, and I can change that, how many hours have I used the application before I become a reclamation candidate? And then you can say after so many days, let's automatically just reclaim that license, right? So this is the rule that I've built for Adobe Illustrator, and I would like to, reclaim that license I talked about earlier right here as the underutilized license for Microsoft Project. So that's a little bit about, compliance and reclamation and how we can get some of that cost savings by having a proper process in place. So that was my first workflow I've explained. And we have several ways of going through different workflows. And we're going to talk a lot about that around HAM. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about license position, as we just talked about, how licenses work. So if I have this problem of, hey, Microsoft or Adobe is going to be, running an audit in our environment, we need to know before that happens, where are we non-compliant? So a quick way to do that is by building a license position report. So let's build one for Adobe and see how simple this can be. So these are all my Adobe licenses, and I only want to see where I'm non-compliant. So now I'm looking at all of my Adobe systems, whatever the product is, if it's non-compliant, what the license metric is, what's the spend, how many rights I own, how many I've consumed, what my true-up cost would be, and what my potential savings is based on reclamation. So I could then just take this report, and people love putting things in PDFs and Excels if I wanted to, but I could take that, and now I can work on my Adobe compliance. So let's just a little bit about licensing and cost savings. One of the things that's important to note is how we build the data behind that. And we do this through software models, and we do this through discovery models. So what we'll do is we'll start with the discovery. So when the data is found in your environment, we obviously call that discovery. We normalize that data, as I talked about, and then we build a software model around that. But it's important to understand, where we are in our normalization process. Not 100% of the things in the environment were going to be normalized. This is going to happen for several reasons. One, maybe you have an internally built application, right? Obviously, that won't be in our catalog. We don't know what that is. So you'll need to look at that and give it a what we call a manual normalization, right? But the rest of this stuff we want to automate for you, as we talked about earlier. So if I come in and I look at the models for normalization, and this is something I suggest everyone does, we can come in and say, okay, this stuff has been normalized, this stuff has been manually normalized, and there'll probably be another little sliver here, which I don't have, that would say, not normalized. And those are the areas where, we as a ServiceNow company would come in and normalize, but it's going to be a small percentage, and you're going to want to take a look at and action those, especially if it's internally built. Now, what does it look like once you do that? Well, it looks like, let's just jump into one of these products. These are my software models, which are, built from discovery models. Once we come in and look at these, we can see that what you can see the proper data is now in here, right? It's just Microsoft, it's public, it's project, and it's 2016, it's professional. And if we come back to the discovery model, and we look at the same product, you can see we got that data from here. It's Microsoft Project 2016. But on the right, you can see the discovered version, Microsoft Project Professional 2016-EN-US, and it gets really complicated. So we want to just normalize that as this and give you this view to look at, which is then going to align to our catalog and give you dates for life cycle, things like general availability dates, end of support dates, end of extended support dates. And you'll be able to have all of that data at your fingertips as you manage each software model. Of course, you can look at this data in other places. We'll talk about lifecycle data in a few minutes. But this is what's important to understand, is that behind the scenes, we need that clean data, we need normalized data, and then we can manage, the life cycle of the asset from there.
Hey, Daryl, quick question that popped in here. Great one. Thank you all for, keep them coming. And I'll interrupt Daryl. He's used to it. Sorry, buddy. Yeah. So a lot of the workflows that you're showcasing here are out of the box, right? I mean, I know you're going to dive into how you can tweak and leverage the low code, no code probably here down the road. But that was one question that we had to make sure we get covered for the audience. And then another one, I know when you get to the hardware asset side, was the mobile scanning piece as well that Kara had asked as well in the chat. So just a couple things to plant the seed for you there, Daryl.
Perfect. Let's talk about the workflows. The workflows now. Thanks, Jeremy. So there's two things to think about when two ways we look at this workflow. So first is through our workflow editor. So we'll start with the complicated way, just so we can look like we're highly technical. But then I'll show you the easy way. So these are workflows here. And this is the reclamation workflow that we just looked at. And you can see it's kind of an if and or, right? If this happens, run this script happens. There's a timer. If this much time passes, do this. And these are the actionable workflows that we were talking about. But let's look at this from a way of, let me open this, of editing that workflow and how simple it can be done. So one of the things I'm going to show everyone later is as hardware disposal. So when you need, we'll look at a workflow. We could look at any of these. It's going to be the same. If I have a a workflow that I need edited, right? We don't want to spend a lot of time with code and complicated. So what we've done is given you this thing called Flow Designer. So here's my flow. This is for hardware disposal order created. I'm going to throw a laptop literally in the garbage, or I'm going to send it to someone to throw in the garbage and do properly. So that's a task. A task is created, and there's all these other tasks that go along with it, attaching records of disposals and approvals and all of these things. If I need to, let's say, send an email when the whole thing is done, what I would do is come down here or wherever I want to in the flow and say, let's add an action and send an email. And then that's it. We have already created the backend code and workflows, so you can just edit them on the fly for your purposes, right? We don't want to start, reinvent the wheel. The wheel's already there. We just want to add polish to it. This gives you the ability to do that through our tool called Flow Designer. So hopefully that answers that a bit about how we do that.
Yeah, Daryl, just to add to that, that's kind of a low code, no code. So the workflows you were showing, you can edit the out of the box workflows, and you can create new workflows as well based on the data that sits in the platform itself. So either or, you could take the existing, tweak it, clone it, and then also you can start from scratch and still leverage the same no code, low code approach in Workflow Designer. Fair statement, Daryl?
Yeah, that's a fair statement. One of the things that we've done is provided hundreds, maybe thousands of these workflows that already are out of the box. Most of those you'll probably never touch because that's just the way a process should be ran. But you might find, you know what, we have this really unique way we want to do something this way. And so what we found is while you can create new ones, you can see here, I can just create a whole new flow, is a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll come in here and they'll copy this flow, keep the original. I won't do that. And then they'll just start editing the copy so they still have that original working off of that one. But regardless, yes, you can create new ones for custom workflows in your environment. Absolutely. Good point, Jeremy. So let's talk about cloud a little bit. And then we need to, a couple of more areas, and then we'll get over to the hardware side of the house. So as we talked about earlier, managing your cloud spend is really about tracking user subscriptions and taking that data and looking at meaningful activity, right? So we'll talk about that. But the other thing is, each vendor has like these really unique way of measuring things. And so we'll give you one example of how we can help do that. So what we're looking at now is DocuSign. And this is a summary of my total rights owned, the total rights assigned, stale rights, which nobody's using it, what the cost is, how many rights are available, and active users, non-active users over time. So the other thing I can do is look at something called envelope consumption. And probably most of us are saying, what is envelope consumption? Well, this just happens to be their unit of measure. This is how DocuSign measures it. And other vendors have different terminology, and we would align to those as well. So here we can see units consumed, units remaining, expected monthly consumption, actual monthly consumption. It's great for forecasting. So each, as I said, SaaS provider, they have their own metrics, and we can track these in the platform, right? So these are things that you want to be considering when you're talking about cloud spend. How are we bringing that data in, and are we considering what this is costing us from an underutilization and from their unique measurement? The other thing is when we're bringing this type of data in, when we start bringing in financial information, we can look at what we call spend detection. So let's take one look. This is the spend detection report. You can see all the publishers listed out by cost center, and you can view them in different ways by department, location. But let's take a look at one here. So I'm going to use Box as my example. So I've got 3 cost centers that are listed here. Which I probably shouldn't. Let's say the corporate IT department is in charge of spending and buying the Box application, as they would be. I would expect to see 2 transactions for a large amount of money, almost $1 million. All right, that sounds right. But you'll look up here, I can also see, why does G&A have 5 transactions? Let me scroll down here. Why does GA have 5 transactions that are all kind of small? These look like onesie-twosie purchases. Obviously, there's some rogue spend out there. And it would be difficult to know about that, right? Without consolidating all of these cost centers transactions together. And so we want to take all of those transactions, put them together, and leverage our buying power and manage less contracts, manage less POs and those sorts of things. So we're going to be able to do that when we bring these things together. A byproduct of doing that, as I talked about in the slides earlier, is being able to find overlapping software. So when we talk about overlapping software, we want to say, what things by category are we purchasing more of 1, 2, 3 of? So mine, I'm looking at over the last 2 years. You can look at it by different dates, and I'm looking at it by total count. You can also look at it on the right by cost. How much am I spending? So if we look at the top one here, it says video conferencing. If I hover it, it says 10. So I've got 10 different purchases from video conferencing category. So if we dig into that, you can see how many transactions I have, how much spend, or I can look at the total counts. But maybe my corporate standard is Zoom, which here at ServiceNow, that is our corporate standard is Zoom. I would expect to see, transactions for Zoom. But then I wouldn't expect to see, GoToMeeting and, any meeting. And then these other ones I've never even heard of, which perhaps they're freeware, right? Maybe you have people that are using things that you haven't vetted from a security standpoint. We want to know about those things. And so by looking at overlapping software, we can find those things, right? And we can look at all the other categories as well and see, where can we maximize our effort from an overlapping standpoint. The other thing about looking at software in this view is knowing when things are going end of life and being able to action them. So here I'm showing what we call the technology portfolio management. And this is really about lifecycle dates, right? So on the left, you can see I have software. Here's an Oracle database. I have some hardware. Here's a Dell PowerEdge server. And then I'll give you a date for when that thing goes GA, or when does that device or piece of software go end of life. And if you hover over this, you can get the details of that. I'll show you the legend here to see what things we're tracking through the life cycle, the GA dates, the warranty information, the extended support, end of sale. And you'll notice this custom here. Perhaps you as your company has negotiated something outside of traditional extended support and regular support, right? You need to add your own date. So you can come into the software model or the hardware model, add that date, and then you have a unique date on your chart here. And then we'll tell you the risk as you get closer to the end of that. We need to be prepared for the end of life for this product. Additionally, it's important to know, what about a business service, right? Perhaps this business service, as you can see here, I'm looking at an application services. These pieces of hardware and these pieces of software are all going to be impacted when this server, this database, whatever it is, becomes end of life, right? Those are important things to note.
Hey, Daryl, really quick, do you mind if I chime in here for a moment?
Please.
Okay. Thank you for that. What you're really looking at here as well is, if you're familiar with, and if you aren't, that's okay. In the spirit of Transformation Tuesdays, I want to add some context here. Oftentimes, the persona, we would call it, is the enterprise architect, would look at something that might be vernacularly aligned to a roadmap. And an enterprise architect traditionally cares about what is the as is today, as we mentioned earlier, the yesterday, and then the to be condition. Well, as enterprise architects follow standards like the IT for IT frameworks, or TOGAF, the Open Group Architectural Framework, they look at what is the current operational status of what we have today, and then what will it be in the future, and what risks do I have to avoid any new move to cloud, remote work, scenario planning, and those equations. The technology portfolio roadmap is that parent view to bring together asset CIs and the CMDB, what the to-be condition would be for any organization to modernize and transform itself. To me, and you can probably hear my passion about this, this is the crux of transformation. Being able to have that end-to-end visibility of when things are coming near end of life so you can be prepared for it is the true visibility to allow for transformation to occur. So it's often coined as application portfolio management, service portfolio management, but in this construct for asset management, it's what is the technology serving as a purpose for the organization today?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. And with that, let's kind of make a transition here and look at some of the hardware. While we've both said repeatedly these things overlap, when you look at it from a dashboard standpoint, it's often unique, right? We have dashboards that tell us when what our software licenses are doing, what our hardware is moving around, but we also have the ability to bring these things all together. Let me zoom out just for this one dashboard. So one of the things that we have found that the executive level people just love is looking at pretty charts and graphs. And so you can see this dashboard here is showing me things like, let me zoom back in, Microsoft licenses. And on the right, I'm looking at CIs by manufacturer, how many physical assets I have, how many computers by manufacturer, by operating system, and giving you the ability to look at all of your assets in one central location is, usually really valuable. And this dashboard can be changed, edited. If I want to change the content, I can just build a report and then go and, here's the report I want. Let's bring it down and add it to this report. So something I encourage everyone to take a look at is the asset overview dashboard and bring in some of your own favorite bits of data that is unique to your business. So let's start the hardware conversation by looking at this dashboard first. What is the hardware dashboard? This is kind of a command center for hardware asset managers, and it's using performance analytics to report overall statistics for our hardware assets. And you can see there's different tabs here. So the model management tab that we're on shows us the number of hardware models that are approaching end of life, this by month, quarter, and year. And then we can also see normalization status for all of our assets, as well as we have a life cycle overview as well, you can see. So we'll go through some of this. The procurement tab allows us to see the purchase orders that are pending worldwide delivery. And we can filter this view by the location. And we can also see vendors by expenditures, as vendors by requests that still require sourcing. On the inventory tab, that'll show us the number of hardware requests that are fulfilled from stock versus buying new, right? We can also monitor open stock orders that are set for delivery and active stock rules by category. This tab also displays our open transfer orders and our open asset audits. And we can also see new hardware assets found during those audits if we go into the audit itself. And then the last tab here, the end of life, shows us the hardware that's ending nearing its end of warranty, again by week, quarter, year. And then you can see the status of our hardware disposals and then the methods of disposals here. So let's dig into some of the way the hardware. Wrong tab here. Let me look at the asset view. So what I'm looking at now is just a list of all hardware assets, everything in my environment, and this is nothing special. Well, it's something special, but it's nothing. It's nothing that you're going to get a lot of data out of by looking at just all of your hardware. But we wanted to create one central location to look at that. But this is really coming from the same as software, a hardware model, which we have normalized. So the same as we talked about from the software side, the hardware needs to be normalized as well. So if we come in and look at this the same as we did in the software, you'll see some of those other areas that I was talking about showing. So, here's all my normalized software. This is partially software. What does that mean? Well, that means that we knew it was a Dell Inspiron, but maybe not the model number. So that's going to go to our content research team. They're going to take a look at that. They're going to find out that it was a D260, add that to the catalog. And next week, hopefully this partially normalized will be moved to regular normalized. But you want to keep tabs on this because you want to make sure that all of the hardware has been normalized before we start managing it and we understand what we're looking at. So let's go through a little bit of the same stuff we did on the hardware side, and then we'll dig into some workflows itself. right? So if I come into these hardware models like we did on the software side, we can come in and we can see the normalization of these, right? So you can see it's been normalized by manufacturer, by product, by model, and we have all of that data just like we did before with the life cycle information, right? We want to build models around our hardware that we can work with that are clean and ready to go. So let's take a look at some of these the workflows that I mentioned earlier.
Daryl, I missed one quick question again that came in. Sorry.
Yep, ask it right now.
Some of those reports, right? So how did you get to some of those reports? And obviously some of the visibility is, I think, the key for executive alignment for a lot of organizations. Where is our spend, right? We hear this often and time again. So kind of back to that report piece. And I'm sorry I missed that earlier. I would have chimed it in when you were there. Sorry. How did you get to those reports that you were showcasing?
Sure. So I had them bookmarked and ready to go, so I was cheating. But if you go to the filter navigator on the top left, depending on which report you're looking for, you'll need to type in the name of them. So for the publisher dashboard, if you type in publisher, I've renamed them, so I could probably open an instance where I haven't, but it's actually called, it'll tell you the name at the top, Software Publisher Analytics. So if you type that in, it'll give you to that one. The other one that we were just on is the Asset Overview dashboard. Type in Asset Overview, it'll get you to that one. The hardware dashboard is literally called the Hardware Asset Dashboard. So if you type that in, it'll bring that one up. But let me show you just a better way to do all of this, which is the All Dashboards dashboard. So if you come to the All Dashboards dashboard, you'll get taken to this. And these are the recent ones I've opened. But if you go to All, I have access to literally everything. You're not going to have this many, so don't feel bad when you don't have close to this many in your environment. But this is going to show you all of the dashboards that you have access to, no matter what they are. And the names are usually pretty obvious, right? So we talked about the license workbench, right? Type in license workbench and you'll get to that. And I think we looked at the Microsoft one, right? So if you come to the license workbench, it's going to show you by publisher. So I showed everyone the Microsoft one, which we looked at project. We were out of compliant. We needed, if we go into that, you'll remember this is what we looked at here. And we gave you the example of, being out of compliance. That's from the Microsoft workbench. And you can do that by manufacturer, and you can build many more of these as you need. And the other ones, overlapping software, typing in overlap, it'll bring you to the overlapping software dashboard. What was the other one? The spend detection. We call that spend detection. If you type in that, it'll take you to the spend detection software. And we gave the example on this one of Box, I think it was.
Yeah. And Daryl, quick question that came in. This is another good one. So the reports you're showcasing here are the out-of-the-box reports that are in the IT Asset Management Suite, right? They do leverage performance analytics, but also to do further performance analytics, like looking at a list and creating your own reports that would require performance analytics, correct, Daryl?
That is correct. That is very correct, Jeremy. And everything that we've looked at today is out of the box. So if you're a future customer or a current customer of the professional version of our ITAM solution, you have access to all of this today. None of this is customized for this demo. Everything I'm showing would be available from, day one of full implementation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's very key. And thank you for the question that popped in. Please, this is exactly your time to ask those. There are scenarios where you might want to create your own report, which would require performance analytics or to model an existing one. But these are all out of the box drillable reports. One key tenet as well that I wanted to mention as you were showing the all dashboards piece, Daryl, is that there was a tab on there that said shared. You can share that with users. And so one interesting aspect is there is an entitlement or a role that is out there called business stakeholder. And oftentimes what we'll hear from organizations is, well, can I export this to PowerPoint? Can I export it to PDF? Well, sure you can. But there are entitlements and roles where you can share that with someone who has, they basically maybe it's an executive level or a director of asset management that wants to just look at a monthly report. You can share those individual reports that you have created with them. And the entitlement that they need is the business stakeholder license. And the reason that becomes critical is I can't drill into a PDF to look at the data. I can see it. It's going to create more emails. It's going to create more phone calls. But if I share this report with someone who wants to see that, then it simply just takes them right to the report. They can look at what the real-time data is. And if they see something red, human nature is, I want to click on it and know why, gives them the data in near real time to be able to do so. So that is an obvious advantage to having access to this level of intelligence and data.
Yeah, that's really the key, isn't it? So let's take a look at this. Something that kind of wanted to show. When we were talking in the beginning, I talked about how this impacts other areas of the business, and we're talking about asset management, right? Which is outside of service management, at its core, right? But there's so much overlap. So most of our customers are using the service management part of the platform, right? We have found. And that means most people are familiar with change requests. Now, let's say a change request comes in. What is the impact of the software side of the house, the hardware side of the house? Well, there's always an impact. And we need to be able to understand what that impact is if we want to be, running a successful service management program and an asset management program. So I'm giving an example here where if I have a request comes in and someone says, I need to increase, my CPU from 4 to 8 cores due to performance issues for a server that I'm working on. Well, that's fine. Let's do that. But what is the impact of doing that? What are the things are there to take into consideration when that's happening? So what about cost? What about the license projection changes that we're not thinking about when we just request that? So if you come down, I can see the CI that's, when I'm creating my change request, I would put in the server. And when I do that, it's going to give me my license change projections from a financial standpoint, right? Well, there are things to think about. The cost implications, when you're changing things per processor, per core, what are we currently spending on that? What's going to be the projected spend on that? And what's the change? How much is this going to cost us? So this might be something where you have a workflow built around this. And the workflow could be something like maybe anything under, $10,000 or a certain dollar amount is automatically approved, but anything, above that has to go to the change advisory board, and the CAB has to look at it and make a decision. Maybe we move the server to another cluster, whatever it is. But we need a workflow built around that. And we need visibility into what the cost implications are of that change, right? So this is just a great example of, the overlap between, the service management side of the house and the asset management side of the house, saving the company, time, money, resources, and all of those sorts of things. So what I wanted to do was talk about an actual workflow. So let's do that with, let me come down here. I have some of these.
And just really quick, Daryl, sorry, quick time check. At about 15 minutes on here, and maybe if we get a chance to do a little bit of the mobile piece for one of the questions that popped in for the that side, if you have time. Okay. If not, we can take that offline and do that in a deeper dive later as well.
Perfect. We'll cover that right after this one. Thanks, Jeremy. So these workflows, as we mentioned, are built for automation, right? And we're trying to optimize all of the data that we have inside the platform. So I'll show a workflow around a disposal order. So let me start by creating a new disposal order. So I have a laptop that needs to be disposed of, and we have a process built around that. So I'll start a new order. You have to, where is it? What's the location, and who's assigned to? So let's submit. We'll start that new one, and we'll come into here and kick that off. The first thing that we need to do is is starting the, let's go back in there, is to look at the first task. And if I look at the task, it's going to say, verify the assets. Okay, well, what's the asset that we're going to dispose of? And so I'll come in, let's find an asset. I think, so we'll just look for an asset. I like this one. Let's go into that. Is it in use? It is. So this is an in-use asset. I'm going to bring this tab over here so it's close to what I'm doing. So let's go back to my, where's my disposal order? I have too many tabs open. Oh, it's way over here. Okay, so let's go back to my disposal order and we'll add the asset. So mine was in use. I know the name. There it is. So I'll add this. And I'll verify the asset by completing this task here. So let's verify the asset. So we'll update the order, come back in. Did I click update? And once we do that, you'll see that, apologize. Once we do that, you'll see the tasks start to populate for us, and we can go through each of these. Did I not do it? Did I click verify? I didn't click verify. Save it, update it. Once I do that, you'll see each of the tasks start to unfold as we go through them. And in the interest of saving time, I'll show you the tasks are to draft it, which is what we're doing now, scheduling it, scheduling it for transfer. The confirmation of that task is the next step, adding the documentation to that, and then completing it. Now, why would you have documentation? We want to be able to, add things like documentation, certificate of disposal, right? Data destruction documentation, right? Those are all things that need to be added to the hardware disposal order. So if I click on the paperclip, obviously, I can take the data destruction, the disposal report. I can open those and add them to the order itself, and I can complete that task. And then I can go through this whole automated workflow without having to manually track each of these. And what's interesting is while you're doing this, if we come back to the dashboard, the whole here it is, hardware assets dashboard, you would actually see, if you go to the inventory tab, you would see the order move around, right? So if I'm transferring something or if I'm disposing of something, you would see that, mine are all in the US. It would be going from this office to the next office, or it would show on a disposal order, and you can see those things moving around on your dashboard. So just a little bit about how those workflows work. So you wanted to know about the mobile, and with that, let me go back to this one slide here to talk about it. So with the mobile app is multi-function. So I'm not sure which feature that we should highlight, and maybe you could give me some information on what you're curious about. But just to remind the audience, so it has multiple functions. First is a storefront, if you will, for users to be able to order. You then receiving assets by scanning barcodes. Doing
Daryl, I think one of those was multiple barcode, multiple asset receiving. So, okay, you're getting a tremendous amount of assets in. I think that came from Kara here in the chat window. Thanks for guiding us there, Kara.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let me, I might have something that I can show along those lines, but looking for it here. So the idea is to when you're scanning barcodes, I'll just speak to it. When you're scanning barcodes, you're taking away the manual process, right? Which eliminates a lot of work and mistakes. The other thing that you'll want to do when you scan, the benefit of scanning barcodes is being able to automate creating of the model itself. So a hardware model can be created. And it can be updated. So the asset tag, for example, right? The name of an asset and the tag itself can automatically be uploaded into So we'll come back over here. When I looked at all of these hardware models, right, they all have a, here we go. They all have a model, they have an asset tag, there's a CI that's unique, a cost. Anything that you scan can automatically in batch be uploaded into the the CMDB as a CI, and this can be done right on the stock room floor in the warehouse, if you will. Now, this is all something that is included within the HAM professional part of our solution. None of this is extra, if you will, if you're using this. So the user that's asking this question may be curious about that. Yes, this is something that we provide out of the box, ready to go. But what other questions do we have in the remaining time? And did I fully answer that question for whoever was asking?
Yeah, well, and I handled that in chat a little bit.
Oh, I'm not on chat. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm here kind of monitoring that. I'm riding shotgun with you. Okay. So I think we need to do a deeper dive on like multiple mobile asset inventory scenarios. We definitely can. One piece that I did, and please keep the questions coming. We'll leave this open for the last 10 minutes. There is something I'm going to put in the chat window as well, if you all don't mind. You might want to save this bookmark. You might be familiar with it if you've ever seen a presentation that our team has given. And we'll post this recording in this webinar in this location as well. This is the ServiceNow community website, and I'm pulling it up right now. So I went ahead and I just put into the search IT asset, or just ITAM. I'm putting this link in the chat window, and we'll post a lot of the webinar content in here, but also you'll find like other use cases and other customer stories that have been in here. Very good training scenarios. They're not all 1 hour long. There are 3 and 4 minute videos in here as well. You can look at some of the things we've done previously on portfolio that has been published here as well. Really great resource just to keep an eye on. Not necessarily you have to go there, but if you do want to save that bookmark, definitely very, very key to looking at the content that other organizations have posted there as well. Very, very helpful. I also have some best practice links that we'll send out on this as well. And from a software asset and a hardware asset perspective also. The last piece, and this is more in line with, I might steal the screen from you here really quick, Daryl, if that's okay.
Yep.
And just bear with me. I know this is being recorded, so I will share this, is that inside of the traditional asset, something that I think is really key for organizations and customers to understand, and this is hardware asset management, is that if you look at your traditional, what comes inside of IT service management from an asset perspective, it'll have your asset model records, it'll have the construct of in the table, stock rooms, transfer orders, purchase orders, contracts, mobile asset receiving. So that means like your mobile assets, your cell phones, your iPads, your laptops. So assets are assets in the core of IT service management. However, what we were discussing today is that next level, Hardware Asset Management Pro, which kind of, and I think this is a very important distinction to understand. What we were showcasing today is that you can still, inside of your catalog with IT service management, have assets, but to leverage the normalization, the life cycle, the full process of the out-of-the-box workflows is the Hardware Asset Management Pro construct that is above what you can already do on the service management asset side. I just thought that would be very important to make sure that the folks here saw today, and wanted to make sure you understood that as well. And if there are any additional questions, please, by all measure, feel free to put those in the chat. We'll hang on here for another 5 minutes, and really appreciate you all attending today. Daryl, thank you for that deep dive. And my last question is in the chat window. I saw a couple. If you could tell us what you'd like to see on the next Transformation Tuesday, and if you felt that this was valuable use of your time, give us that feedback and come to the next one. We'll do it again for you over and over again.